Some of you know Heather, Jennifer and Mickey. I don't know if you've heard from Heather this week. Our friend Heather, who lives in Bali, she had an operation on Wednesday, and she died. And I know she died because she told me on Thursday. Her heart stopped during the surgery, and they resuscitated her. So she was. Tim, I'll tell you this story again. So my friend Heather died on Wednesday in an operation. Her heart stopped, and they resuscitated her. And afterwards, she said all the staff came to visit her, and they were very moved. Some of them were like sort of literally holding their hands at their hearts and crying, and because they said that when they resuscitated her, she sat up and was like completely in a state of joy and said to them, "Do you all see the light?" And she doesn't remember that at all. She has no recollection of it. But what she has got is a sense of happiness and confidence. And I find that, I mean, there are stories, we hear examples of people who have near-death experiences, and they come out of it with a kind of a renewed, more focused view of what's important in life. I find it amazing that she has no recollection of the experience itself, but she has this knowing of that, as I said, she said she has this sense of happiness and a confidence that things are okay and that death is okay. And there's this lovely phrase, I'll say it slowly. If you die before you die, then when you die, you won't die. Can you follow that? If you die before you die, then when you die, you won't die. So there is something that has to die. And that's the waking up that has to happen. But the truth of it is that we will wake up to seeing that it never existed in the first place. That which we take to be, again, this sense of solid, permanent, separate, independent me. And from that belief, all of the reactivity is happening, the liking, all the suffering actually is happening. So the death of that, the realization, again, that it, and because it never existed in the first place, this is why it's simple, but not easy. Jetsunma says, if you were to sum up all of the Buddhist teachings into 2 words, any idea? 2 words, what might they be? Reality. That's 1 word. Seeing reality. Yeah. Any other guesses? Chocolate cake.
Waking up.
Waking up. Yeah. Yeah. Seeing reality, waking up. Jetsunma says it as let go. Yeah. Let go. So that seeing reality, that waking up is again, there's nothing to attain, there's nothing to get, there's nothing that we don't have. We just have to let go. And that's the death, that letting go. And then she said, if you want to make it holy, you can say, let go, hum pei. And Sokni Rinpoche says similar. His way of saying it is, who cares, so what? And this isn't about becoming careless. This is about becoming carefree. And if we can have that response when someone steps in front of us in the coffee queue, who cares? So what? Genuinely, not just pretending we're inside, oh, whatever, you just step in front of me, but inside it's like, we have to see really what's happening inside. So we're going to do a meditation. I'm going to take us through a guided practice on impermanence. Maybe just to say a little bit about, I mean, we did a practice this morning. I have said, that the path is about meditation, about becoming familiar. And what we're becoming familiar with is, again, the truth of reality. So meditating on the characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and selflessness. So these are, I actually usually hear them as the 4 seals of Buddhism. And the 4th being nirvana is true peace. But these first 3, this is like, these are the seals, the defining characteristics of reality. Impermanence, of samsaric reality, yeah. And there's this, up here we've got what's called the wheel of life. And within it, so on the outside there's this like fierce looking creature. This is called the Lord of Death. And so held within his fangs is all of our existence. And you've got 6 realms, 6 possibilities, humans, gods, demigods, animals, hungry ghosts and spirits, and hell realms. So these are 6 possibilities within this cyclic existence, and this is why it's a wheel, it's a cycle of existence. On the outside, there are what are called the 12 links. All of these are like, you could have teachings for weeks and months and years. The 12 links of dependent arising, which if we follow them mindlessly and just let it play out in one direction, it'll just keep going, keep going, keep going. But if we start to examine it and unravel it, and that's in those moments of where we have even a fleeting moment of freedom from the grasping, then we're starting to unravel that continuous cycle. And what keeps the whole thing going is right in the spoke of the wheel, in the center, around which the whole thing turns, is ignorance, and arising out of ignorance, attachment and aversion. So this ignorance, again, is that not knowing, and it's an active not knowing. It's not that I don't know the capital of Lithuania, but it's an active keeping this whole thing going. Matrikpa, that ignorance. And this lovely analogy Jetsunma often uses. So here's the wheel, yeah? The wheel of existence. And each one of these threads, I don't know if you can see this online, each of the beads is like every action, every moment. And each time we have like a movement of the mind, person in front of me in the coffee queue, he's an idiot. I'm creating a seed of anger, aversion. So I'm keeping that going. If I keep going, yep, idiot, my life was going fine until that person out there, something outside of me is keeping all my suffering going. Something outside me is bringing me my happiness. That ignorance is keeping this whole thing going, keeping it going, keeping it going, yeah? So each time there's even that little action, the whole thing moves. But what's keeping it together, the string, is the belief in a permanent, separate, solid me. That's the grasping. Cut the string, the whole wheel stops, yeah? Every analogy is limited, so if we go into this too much, you go, yeah, but. So like our life isn't a mala. But does that, like, can you hear that? Does that kind of make sense? Why did I go to there? I'm talking about impermanence. Just to stay on this for a moment, like, it's a really, really, really big view to consider other realms, different lifetimes. I mean, I know, Arab, for you, you've been brought up in a culture that, like, this is part of your cultural understanding. For us in the West, it's different. And I know the modern world is becoming, by the way, online, we've got this wonderful young 17-year-old Nepali with us. And I think it's always a joy to have, to meet people who meet the Dharma early and young. It's just, yeah, fantastic. Turn your jealousy into, yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. So this is where aspiration is really important, and like jealousy in its wisdom energy is all accomplishing wisdom. So it's the wisdom that has the, like, we recognize 17 years old, that's where I want to be. I want to be turning up to these teachings at that age. May I be able to do that? I'm gonna get there. And in the meantime, we can do everything we can to support everybody else who's that age and who might want to turn up, you know. So we recognize the distance. Here I am, I'm 62. I didn't turn up to this at 17, but I can make prayers and aspirations. May I turn up to this earlier and earlier and earlier. May I be born into a family that just drops me right into those places. So that I can receive these teachings. So seeing that gap, seeing where I am and where somebody else is, again, that's a fertilizer for us. We can use it to learn from it and to close the gap. Yeah. But I mean, I'm with you. I'm jealous too. I remember watching this film called Blessings, and I know Dorji Lamo has been to this nunnery. It's in Nepal. Sorry, it's in Tibet, Nangchen. Wangdrak Rinpoche is the abbot, and it's maybe 400 nuns there, and they're extraordinary. They do long-term retreat, like years. And in this documentary, it's unusual to step into a long-term retreat, but they have a boundary, and they give permission for particular people to be allowed in. And the person that's allowed in this situation is Sokni Rinpoche, who was their teacher. And Sokni Rinpoche happened to be with a film crew and a bunch of Westerners. In the nuns' mind, they were all just Rinpoche's entourage, so come on in. So they're all in this like 3-year retreat space with these nuns. And so it's in extraordinary footage, actually, to have that access. And there's a lovely line in it, actually, where the Westerners ask the question of these nuns, like, why do you do this? Why would you have 3 years, you know, sitting, doing this practice? And I don't quite remember the wording. And Dorji Lama, if I get this wrong, you can tell me. I think they look a little bit confused, and they're like, well, for bliss. Wow, for bliss. So again, just a little warning here. Don't chase the bliss, because if you chase it, you're not going to get it. Don't grasp it. It's a natural byproduct of our, because it's innate. But again, I guess what we have to focus on is all the non-bliss elements so that we can remove them, and the bliss will take care of itself. But I remember watching the documentary, and actually by the end of it, I was depressed. I was despondent, I was jealous. And I thought, they're so far ahead of me. That's like, I felt despondent. And then, not long after, actually it was Jampadeki came to visit. And again, some of the people online know Jampadeki. She's a nun who celebrated her 80th birthday yesterday, I think. She's been a nun about 30 years or more now. I've forgotten how long. More, yeah, maybe 40 years. So she came to stay, and she said, let's watch the documentary about the nuns in Nangchen. And in my mind, it's like, I have to go through this again? I have to get depressed again? But I couldn't tell her. It felt like a very bad Buddhist to say, actually, I just get depressed watching that film. But I thought, okay, I'll watch it with her. And the second time I watched it, I think there was a line in it, at least this is what I heard. And again, Dorje Lama, you might think she might have been watching a different film. But in this, they were focusing, there was one point where they're interviewing the nuns in the kitchen who are cooking all the food, and other nuns are out there collecting yak dung. And so it's a whole village community. They're doing everything. They're building the nunnery, they're out taking care of the yaks, they're in the kitchen. And one of them, I think one of the people in the kitchen said, and it was in reference to preparing the food for the nuns in their long-term retreat. She said something like, we're all walking each other up the mountain. And I heard it and I went, oh my God, I'm on the mountain. Wow. I really felt it. So that, like, if we can remember that it's a very long-term view. And what's needed for us as we go along the path is to really cultivate a confidence and a trust that what we're doing is taking us in the right direction. As long as we keep, referring back to that lineage that we're part of, and having a trust and a respect for, and always it's about checking it out for ourselves, proving it for ourselves as we go along. Is this working? Then we can stay on the path with confidence and trust that we're heading in the right direction. Again, Mingyur Rinpoche was saying to us, there's a very important distinction between the experiences that we have along the way and the realizations. And the experiences have a flavor to them. So you can be like, wow, oh my goodness, I had a great meditation. It was, my heart was open. I just felt love and compassion and wow. And then the next time you sit down, nothing. And so it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. I think Jack Cornfield, who'd done long retreat, went to his teacher, and he'd had a fabulous, he was having a good retreat, and all the meditations were lovely, and he was having all of these experiences, and he was describing them all to his teacher, and his teacher went, great, more things to let go of. And so that's really important, that we keep letting go. And if we have all of the blissful, I don't, and I'm kind of glad I don't, because I am glad I don't. I would like them. They will come. But the grabbing them and the needing them and the wanting them and the thinking that that's what makes this practice like, yep, it's all happening. We just turn up, keep turning up, and having a confidence that it's taking care of itself as long as we just keep turning up. Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche, who's the father of Mingyur Rinpoche and Sokli Rinpoche, he says, if you had a good meditation or a bad meditation, then you weren't meditating. Yeah? Because how was that? Did I go up? Yeah. It's always like that mind that's analyzing, criticizing, assessing the performance, the expectation that there's something I need to get that I haven't got. Yeah. I'll stop talking and let's do the meditation. What I was meant to be saying, I think, at the very beginning of all of that was to just say, you know, there's two types of meditation. There's many different ways of doing the practice, but it comes down to two particular ones of in calm abiding and special insight. And the calm abiding is just calm the mind down. So let's say I've got there's water in here and there's mud in it. If I keep moving it around and moving it around and moving it around, it's just always going to be muddy and you can't see anything. So the first thing you have to do is just calm it down. Just let it settle, settle, settle. So all the mud will settle to the bottom. And then I can start the analytical meditation, the insight into the mud, into the, that you can just hone in on it. Calm abiding is very attractive. The idea of like the mind settling, everything becomes open, peaceful, and calm. Who would not want that? But that's just the beginning. That's just giving you the capacity to then start to go into the analysis. And the analysis is where you really start to develop the insight that really will free you. As long as we haven't gone into that analysis, the potential for that to come back up again is always there. There's a lovely, no, sorry, I will, let's do the practice, because that's something I'm very good at, is to just keep talking, talking, talking. And this is called active laziness, actually. It's the, you know, I'd love to sit and meditate, but I'm just too busy doing virtuous things, talking about the dharma. So we're going to do a meditation practice on impermanence. Okay, so just taking a moment to, again, check your posture, check that you're sitting comfortably. There's a nice way of describing it. It's like, it's about sitting upright, but not uptight. So as you find a position that's comfortable, and please as well, we can meditate anywhere, anytime. It doesn't have to be, you know, sitting in a particular posture. This is me, a meditator. But doing the formal practice is a great support for us to then be able to take it out into the world. And that's where that's where the real value of it comes in. So it's very important and useful to have this formal setting where it's a bit like if you're learning how to drive. You don't learn on the fast lane of the highway. You learn in a nice, quiet little back street, and then you can go out onto the highway when you've become more skilled with your driving. So just checking that you're sitting comfortably, that the spine is loosely straight. Again, as I say, upright but not uptight. And also just checking through the body, noticing for any areas of tension, of tightness, where you might be sort of holding. And giving yourself permission to just soften. And if you can't soften, if it just feels too tight, that's fine too, just accepting it. But just going through the body from the top of the head down through your body in your own time. And as I say, if you notice any areas of tension and tightness, just allowing it to soften. And now just for a while, bringing your attention to the breath, to the sensation of the air as it enters and leaves through your nostrils. So here we're not changing the breath, we're just using it as an anchor. So the emphasis here is on our awareness, our recognition of the breath, the natural breath. So we just notice whatever sensations are there as the air enters and leaves through the nostrils. And again, the mind will wander. And when we notice that we've been lost in thoughts or lost in sounds, lost in anything, in that moment, we can just begin again, coming back to the sensations of the breath. Now become aware of your body and just thinking of its many parts. Your feet, your legs, your hands, arms, chest, neck, head, eyes, mouth. Just bringing your attention to these many different parts of the body. The skin, hair, the boundary between you and the outside world. All of these many parts. Notice the momentary change that's happening in your body. Your heart is beating. Blood flowing through your veins. circulating through your whole body. The breath is flowing in and out of your lungs. The energy of your nerve impulses moving through the whole body. Just becoming aware of this momentary change that's happening in your body all the time. And now becoming aware of the more subtle cellular changes. That your body is made of trillions of cells, each of them in constant motion. Blood cells, skin cells, stomach, brain cells, all of them moving, changing, dying, dividing, reproducing. Constantly changing. And all of these cells are made of countless parts themselves. They're all made of atoms vibrating, exchanging subatomic particles at phenomenal speed. Really get a sense of the body at work, a dynamic flow, ever changing. Nothing static. And now we turn our attention to our mind, which is also composed of countless parts: thoughts, perceptions, feelings, memories, plans, fears, desires. Your mind is constantly changing. Simply watch it without trying to control it or change it. Just see how thoughts appear and disappear, and observe them without becoming attached to them, without pushing them away. And now bring your mind to the world immediately around you, without needing to look at any of these things, but just being aware of the room that we're sitting in, the walls, the ceiling, the objects in the room, the space around you. Even though it appears as static and solid, permanent, it too is made up of many, many different parts, constantly changing. Think of your possessions, the things that you've invested in. Maybe your smartphone, your computer, your clothes, your backpacks. Whatever comes to mind. And each of these is subject to change. Nothing lasts forever. Change is happening all the time, not just when things wear out or when they're destroyed, but in every instant. Think of the people around you, those you know and maybe acquaintances, strangers. Each of them was born, and each of them will die. Our view of these people as unchanging, clearly labeled with some solid idea, is inaccurate. They're constantly changing, constantly in flux, just as our own body and mind. Think of our relationships to these people. These too are changing. Friendships, romantic partners, work relationships, all in change. Sometimes close, sometimes distant. Even if things don't wear out or relationships don't fall apart, our mind changes. The happiness and pleasure we experience from objects and people is subject to change. We can simply become tired or bored with something that once gave us joy and excitement. We can experience gross, sudden change in the world. It could be health crisis, environmental crises, accidents, loss. They can help us connect to all these other forms of change that we can become aware of at every moment. As we become aware of change, It helps us to realize that our current situation is also subject to change. Reflecting on impermanence, we can know for certain that things will change as they always have. It helps us to put all our challenges into perspective, to reduce or even eliminate our fear, and to let us be present and engaged for the problems, the challenges, and the joys facing us now and into the future. We can apply the reasoning of impermanence to whatever arises in our mind. And when we glimpse a clear, strong sense of the ever-changing nature of any of these things, we can let go of our analysis and just hold our attention on this intangible feeling of realizing impermanence itself. Whatever is unpleasant or disturbing won't last forever. It may change for the better. And whatever is beautiful or pleasing will also eventually change and disappear. We can't expect it to give us lasting happiness. But realizing this can make us enjoy the impermanent beauty all around us, in the world, and in our relationships. Recognizing that these external things can't give us lasting happiness and satisfaction lessens our attachment to them. And enables a more stable, genuine happiness to arise. Just take a stretch if you need to. Okay, any questions, any comments in the room, online? Yep. Sorry, we get the mic for the...
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just had the thought maybe with the coffee situation, just as an example, because it's very concrete. I was wondering, where do you see the value kind of to fake it till you make it? I think sometimes that's a useful thing. Maybe I don't feel very happy and just, but I can maybe say, let's pretend I assume he was super urgent, and then maybe at some point it becomes kind of genuine.
Yeah.
But maybe it also kind of leads you in the wrong direction because, of course, it's fake by definition. What's your experience with it?
So yesterday we, in our finishing our retreat with Mingyur Rinpoche, Rinpoche talked about the dedication, and he described 3 different ways of dedicating. And this isn't just specific to dedication, this would be in all of our practice. We can do it in 3 ways. One is, he described it as poison,
Mm-hmm.
poison-like dedication. Following, was it? And the third one was non-conceptual, I think, yeah? So the poison-like dedication it's like, maybe an example would be saying it's like love with hooks attached. It's transactional. So it's not entirely pure and altruistic in its outlook. And I would say it's where we're at. Like I'm giving you this and I want you to have it. I also know that you withdrew $10,000 from your bank this morning and you're not quite sure what to do with it. I heard that in the grapevine and that you were kind of thinking to give it away. So I want you to have this. So, I mean, it's doing any positive deed from the perspective of believing myself to be permanent, separate, and independent. So they talk about the gift, the giver, and the giving. So here's me giving this to you. So there's still this idea of subject and object. And that's the poison, is that I'm still involved in this idea of like that there's a transaction going on. So it's fake, but it's still heading in the right direction. Yeah, it is going to support the cultivation of more virtue. And what we'd like to say should be happening along the way is that necessarily we're going to be limited in our capacity to become to become who we really are, to have boundless wisdom and compassion, and all along the way, it is going to be fake, but it's fake. It's a fakeness that's hopefully heading in the right direction, and then that's bringing it to the second level, the following, which is. I know that my action at the moment is limited. I do want you to be happy. I do want you to have this nice object, and this is important to me. So I'm even in the giving it, I'm stretching myself. I'm stretching my capacity to be virtuous. It's probably not the best example because my intention is about you giving me the money. But the following is thinking about like all of these examples of these great teachers and knowing that they have the capacity to give selflessly, that that they have fully developed their qualities. And so I'm saying, I'm not really able to do it, but I'd like to be able to do it in the same way, in the same spirit that they have. So kind of hanging on to their coattails. And that's a very valuable, important relationship to develop. So it's going to move us in that direction towards it becoming authentic a lot more quickly. And I love what Venerable Robina says in regard to these teachers and their capacity to help us. They have perfected their ability to just spontaneously help. They don't have to think about it. So they have that power. And then Venerable Robina says, all we have to do is give them an inch, even like a little crack of letting go of our trying to control everything and just opening and say, could you help me here? And she said, if we can give them an inch, they are capable of taking 1,000,000 miles. Yeah. So that opening is a very it's opening up into a very powerful relationship, and we know of this like in kind of mundane terms of let's say if I'm training to be a tennis player, and I have access to, I'm not going to remember his name, Federer. If I have access to him as a coach, I would trust that he's going to be able to move me along very, very quickly if I open to him and give him my full attention, and if I follow him. So that's just going to speed me along in my capacity to develop my tennis skills. So again, this is the following, is like watching, paying attention, giving our attention to those examples and trusting that they're going to help us. And then the non-conceptual one is opening up into the space of there is no separate giver, giving, and gift. It's just all that flow of energy. I have no idea if I was answering your question.
I think so, actually.
The fake it. So the fake it till you make it is valid, as long as it's underpinned by a recognition that just naturally you have that potential. You're not a fake. Again, Venerable Robina often uses this example of, and I don't know if you're going to understand this word in French. Do you know what an acorn is? Do you know what an oak tree? Yeah, an acorn is the seed of an oak tree. So we're acorns. Like when we say, who am I? If I'm walking around going, I am a Buddha, I am, and I'm not right now, but I have the potential. So it's like I am an acorn. So what defines me is, what is an acorn in its essence? It is a potential oak tree. That's what it really is. So to say I can become an oak tree is not fake. But if I think I'm one now, then like there is a distance to travel, but nonetheless, it's absolutely all there. So the faking it is that movement along towards, so in its essence, it's not fake. But in the meantime, yeah. Like there's that, again, there's then, I don't know if I quoted it, oh, no, I was talking about the beginner's mind. I think it was Suzuki Roshi said, you're perfect as you are, and you could do with a little improvement. Yeah. Yeah.
The question that, oh, okay. How do we see our progress on the path? Because I feel that each time if I try to see our progress on the path, I was trapped into a conceptual mind that maybe I just see the experience of the meditation, like how long I can sit on the cushion,
Yeah.
like the experience in the meditation or something that is very conceptual.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it still need to see the progress on the path, so that you can have the courage to keep going on.
Yep.
Yeah, but every time I try to see that, trap into that conceptual mind. So
Yeah.
how to get rid of that?
Yeah.
From that mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a very important question, I think, because it's inevitable that we're going to be measuring how am I doing along the way. And as you say, like it is encouraging to see the progress. The very fact that you're able to ask the question and be aware of it is an indicator that you're aware of that, the trap of it. We were looking at Chogyam Trungpa, spiritual materialism. I don't know if were you reading that? Let me find I have a quote from him. Which might be answering what you're asking here. Okay. So I'm just going to read this is from a book called Spiritual Materialism by a teacher, Chogyam Trungpa. We've come here to learn about spirituality. I trust the genuine quality of this search, but we must question its nature. The problem is that ego can convert anything to its own use, even spirituality. Ego is constantly attempting to acquire and apply the teachings of spirituality for its own benefit. The teachings are treated as an external thing, external to me, a philosophy which we try to imitate. We do not actually want to identify with or become the teachings. So if our teacher speaks of renunciation of ego, we attempt to mimic renunciation of ego. We go through the motions, make the appropriate gestures, but we really do not want to sacrifice any part of our way of life. We become skillful actors, and while playing deaf and dumb to the real meaning of the teachings, we find some comfort in pretending to follow the path. Whenever we begin to feel any discrepancy or conflict between our actions and the teachings, we immediately interpret the situation in such a way that the conflict is smoothed over. So this next line, I think, is what I was thinking of as you asked the question. The interpreter of this gap between where we're at and where we're, where our actions are and where the teachings are. And again, remembering when I'm saying the word teachings, it's not as this external philosophy, but the teachings being awareness, compassion, wisdom, who we are. So as we notice and we're trying to assess that gap between where we are now and like how much am I at, 30%, 40%, 50%? The interpreter, the person who's asking the questions, is the ego in the role of spiritual advisor. So necessarily it's going to be still trying to do a control job of the situation. Yeah. I mean, there will be genuine progress. There will be, I would say that, again, as I was saying earlier, like if we're going to try and measure it just based on what's happening when we sit in our practice. That might be assessing the experiences. Some of them are great, some of them not so great. And as Rinpoche was reminding us, the realizations, the stabilization, doesn't have a flavor. But I would say where we get to see it is when we're out in the world. And something might happen that, and it can often happen like, oh wow, a situation that we're usually triggered by. And then when it comes along again, you're like, oh, I didn't, I didn't react that time. So I would say that's where the real progress can kind of get measured. I mean, Ram Dass says, if you want to find out how enlightened you are, spend the weekend with your family. Yeah. Like we've got this 3-month immersion at the moment with Tergar Institute, and it's like, it's a nice container to be in. Find out what happens when you go home. That's where you get the real, like it's a valuable, very valuable measure of, like, where am I? Have I reduced my, my habitual tendencies? And we need to be very, it does take a lot of honesty and also a very long-term view, I think, to really begin to trust that this is might take years before we really start. Oh yeah, I'm not so angry, and also the people around you will start to kind of, you'll hear them speaking about you differently, but don't go looking for it. Sharon Salzberg, a great teacher, particularly on loving kindness, and one of a book that she wrote called Faith, and the subtitle, Trusting Your Own Deepest Experience, is the subtitle. And it's a very autobiographical book. And she talks about a time in, I think she was about 20 or more years into her practice at this stage, and she was on a retreat in Australia. And she had I would say, I don't think she used these words, but the term a dark night of the soul, where like you have this, well, Mingyur Rinpoche describes it beautifully as a nervous breakthrough. He didn't have a nervous breakdown, he had a nervous breakthrough, where for him it was these anxiety attacks. Like, I think it was when he was in his first long-term retreat that really intensified, and he had this nervous breakthrough because he turned towards it and allowed himself to go through it. With Sharon Salzberg, she was over 20 years into her practice, and had established her the IMS retreat center, and very well established and genuine, authentic practitioner. And there was this kind of a complete collapse of everything that she was taking refuge in. Nothing was touching the pain and the trauma. And for her, it was a lot of childhood trauma. And I think she described it as like the skin that was holding all of it together just fell apart. And everything that she was usually relying on just wasn't touching it. She was trying to take refuge. She was trying to sit with it, nothing. She was just lost in the pain of it. I think the potential for that to happen to us at any point in our practice is there, but I think it's also just a movement towards becoming more and more and more and more authentic, and uncovering more and more and more layers of our suffering, of our pain. So yeah, I think it's inevitable that we're going to rely on things going okay. I'm getting more, like thinking that it's very hard to not have an expectation of spiritual progress. It's almost impossible, I would say. But there's and again, maybe that's the faking it, is that we're faking ourselves into being a really good spiritual practitioner. And that's inevitably going to fall apart. And it'll probably fall apart in ways that is going to leave us feeling it could be quite traumatic. We could find ourselves having, but that they're breakthroughs. Again, it's a letting go, letting go, letting go. Yeah. But absolutely, I mean, the encouragement of like what's happening in our formal practice, if it's there, it's definitely like moving us. It's helpful. Yeah, and it can either come from within, but also from without. Like with the this beautiful story, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I have lots of Australia stories. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has a friend in Australia, the Reverend Bill Cruz, a Christian minister, who has founded an organization. I'll tell you 2 stories about Reverend Bill. He feeds the poor. He feeds homeless people. So 2 stories about him. First one, I mean, he feeds thousands of people every day. And they come to the compound in which his church is. And the Reverend Bill says that he's got all these homeless people turning up every day. And then he's got these old ladies who are looking after the church. They make sure that the linen is nice and clean. They put the flowers up, and like they're taking care of everything. And the Reverend Bill said, I generally keep the 2 groups apart. The homeless druggies are over there. The lovely ladies tidying everything up are over there. And he said, they just stay away from each other, mostly. But he said one day he walked into the church, and the old ladies were there, and there was these young guys who had come into the church, and they'd made a mess. And the old ladies had lost their patience with them, and they were shouting at them. And, you know, and the Reverend Bill said he walked in, he thought, there's nothing I can do here. I just have to let this play out, see where it's going. And so one of the old women said to these young boys, why don't you just go home? Why are you here? And one by one, these young men stepped forward and explained to the old women why they could not go home. They explained about, you know, alcoholic parents, abuse, etc., etc. And when they had finished explaining why they couldn't go home, the old ladies turned to the Reverend Bill and said, you're not doing enough for them. You need to do more for them. So there's that story. The other story was His Holiness and Reverend Bill met each other many times. And actually His Holiness came and ate lunch with all of those homeless people. And they described each other. The Reverend Bill said, His Holiness the Dalai Lama is the best Christian I have ever met. And His Holiness said of Reverend Bill, he is the best Buddhist I have ever met. But one time the Reverend Bill said to His Holiness, tell me who you are. And His Holiness's response, which he often gives, is, I am a simple Buddhist monk. And as you were saying earlier, simple is not easy. But His Holiness, yeah, he says, I am a simple Buddhist monk. And the Reverend Bill said, I don't buy that. You tell me who you really are. And His Holiness's response was, I am the teachings. So again, this is who we really are. And this is who, it's just a question of recognizing and stabilizing that recognition. We might get glimpses of it, and then we can get lost in glimpses and think, yep, I've arrived, I'm there. The glimpses will fall away. It's the stabilizing it that's important, so that there's nothing other than the teachings. There's nothing other than awareness, compassion, and wisdom. So yeah, for His Holiness to say, I am the teachings. And it makes me think of the Christian term. And in the beginning, the Word was made flesh and dwelt amongst us. This is the description of Jesus. So in that moment when His Holiness, you know, will offer more than I am a simple Buddhist monk, it's again, I think, like what you're saying, like you get a glimpse of, I need to know that there's more. I need to be given an encouragement. And I've heard it also said with, again, with His Holiness, you know, people have said, like His Holiness will say, oh, I think I'm just at the path of accumulation, you know, if I'm very lucky, I might get this. And then somebody said, like, if that's where you are, how like, that's not encouraging. We need to know that you've achieved more. And I think that one time His Holiness said something like, yeah, I do remember being there for the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni. I do remember being in the crowd. Like, whoa. So every now and then, yeah, like being given that bigger picture, it helps us. Like if we're walking towards Everest and we never see where we're heading, so you get a glimpse, wow, Everest, and then down into the swamps, walking. But you had the glimpse. And as long as you've got a good guide, you know, that should encourage you and help you to just keep going. Yeah. Any other questions? We've got 6 minutes until lunchtime. I wanted to talk about renunciation, and I think one of you French women mentioned that word, so I got a bit excited about that because I do want to talk about it, and it's we'll do it after lunch. But this is a story that's often told, and this was so our real practice depends on your thoughts and intentions. So again, like what's driving it? That's what we really have to pay attention to, and like turn that focus inwards to see. Yeah, what's really going on? So Drum Trungpa, a great teacher of the past, once saw a monk circumambulating a stupa and addressed him respectfully. And he said, Master, doing circumambulation, walking around the stupa. I don't know if circumambulation is a word we use at all. Is it in our everyday? Circumambulating, yeah. Anyway, going around in a circle. So if you've never heard this before, the idea of like, sorry, I'm going to jump to another story. You'll see many Buddhists circling around holy objects. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche was in Australia one time, and he carried with him all of these relics. And they were placed in this beautiful arrangement in each of the centers where Rinpoche was teaching. And so all day, every day, during the teachings, people would walk around these holy objects, which I also did. And then Rinpoche was flying out of Sydney Airport, and all of these relics were stored in suitcases, and they were being carried through his hand luggage. So while Rinpoche was checking in, these were just sort of stacked up in the middle of this big terminal building. And some of the students that were there to say goodbye to Rinpoche were circling around the suitcases. And I looked at the suitcases and I thought, my reputation, what are people going to think of me if I walk over and walk around a circle of suitcases in the middle of an airport? They're going to think I'm crazy. And I'm not going to do that. And then I was having this logical discussion with myself. Okay, so you thought it was meritorious, that it was a valuable thing to do to walk around these relics in the temple. But now that they're in a suitcase in the middle of an airport, suddenly they're not something of value. So I knew that logically, if I was following the logic that they are valuable, then whether they're in a suitcase in a public place or in a temple makes no difference. They're still valuable if I believe that to be true. So I kind of, with that logic, I thought, I have to go over there and walk around them. And all I could say is when I did go and walk around them, all that was in my mind was like, why would I not do this? It just like, there's something of value happening. And I guess it was all the more powerful for me because I wasn't lost in a like, you know, blind faith. This was, I was pushing my own belief system. I was doing something that didn't feel like a reasonable thing to do, but oh my goodness, I can still feel it when I think of it. It was like, why would you waste the opportunity by hanging back? So anyway, that was the side story. What was the main point? Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I've lost track.
Talking about renunciation.
Renunciation. I have renounced the story. It's completely gone. Oh, sorry, we'll go back to
circumambulation.
circumambulation. Yeah, that was it. Okay. Okay, so, yeah. So he said, doing circumambulation is great, but it would be better if you practiced. And so the monk is like, okay, I thought circumambulation was practice. Well, maybe I should do prostrations. So then he started doing prostrations. And again, Drum Tumpa said, great, good to do prostrations, but better if you practice. Okay, I'll meditate. So he goes off and meditates for a year, comes back. I've been meditating, fantastic, but better if you do some practice. So he says, okay, I don't know, what? And then he said, what do you mean by practice? And then Drum Tumpa said, give up this life. Give up this life. Give up this life. So your homework is, what does that mean? Okay, you can think about that over lunch or breakfast or dinner, wherever you are. Give up this life. Do I want to? And why would I? So thank you very much. Lovely to have you here in the room and in Australia and England. And if you're coming back, we'll see you after an hour. Is that right?
Yeah, 1 hour.
Yeah. Okay.
Anna Darla wrote, so inspiring. Thank you, dear Dharma sister. So she wrote a thank you for you. Yeah.